We'll call our meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you do the roll call, please.
McEvers.
Here.
Ettinger.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Gookin.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
English.
Here.
Let's please rise for the invocation. We have Pastor Jeffrey Winkler of the New Life Church.
Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much that you create everything. All things come from you. You sustain and hold everything together. Thank you so much for this awesome city, for this awesome council. And we just declare right now that you're moving in unity and wisdom in all things. And we give you all the praise and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Would lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I don't believe that we have any amendments to the agenda tonight.
Mr. Mayor, we do have
Oh,
one.
we do have, okay.
We're adding section 74206B to the executive session tonight.
Okay, Renata, do we need any action to add that?
Yes, we do, please.
Okay,
Make that a motion.
A motion.
so we have a motion to amend the executive session.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on
And,
that?
Mr. Mayor, this is pursuant to an item that just came up today, which is why it's an addition within 24 hours, which is what the code says.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. We'll add that on to the executive session. And now we move to the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move for approval of the consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 17050.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ettinger.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
McEvers.
Yes.
Gookin.
Aye.
English.
Yes.
Motion carried. We are now to the public comment portion. Anyone that would wish to address the council shall have 3 minutes to do so on city business. Anyone wishing to give public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement? Dan?
Sure. A couple of things. From time to time, actually fairly frequently, the city will be asked to have the mayor, and if he's not available, a council member give kind of a formal welcome if there's a conference or convention in town. And I've had the happy occasion to do that several times, but I don't think I remember getting a nice thank you card before. And I would like to acknowledge that let's say it was the Idaho Good Sam Jamboree back in June 14th to 18th, and with a nice little picture, and there's stuff that says, "Thank you for your warm welcome at our Samboree. Our members enjoyed many things your community offered, and your presence was much appreciated." So anyway, I appreciate them. And then other groups, if you'd like an official welcome from, one of the city people, ask us and we'll come. The other item is just to know for the next meeting I think I mentioned Amy and Renata, but I will be gone for a training conference for my day job. So in terms of, quorum or whatever, I won't be at the next meeting. Or if you want to bring something hot up when I'm not here, go ahead. So.
We'll put that off. Thank you, Dan. Anyone else that would?
I have an announcement. 8 years ago, we had this young intern here helping us with the TV, and Kyle Croissant is back in town. He just walked in here. Kind of freaked me out. It's been 8 years, and I'm still here. But he's the guy that designed the logo for the Channel 19, and so I wanted to say thanks, Kyle. It's good to see you back, and hopefully we can find you some work. Okay?
Anyone else have anything? I just have a couple of appointments. We'd like to appoint Susan Weathers and Benton. I've never seen Benton before. I've always had Ben Wolfinger, but it's probably officially Benton Wolfinger to the Personnel Appeals Board. So we'll be looking for council.
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We'll move on to general services, and we have the approval of the purchase of a police department cold storage unit from Fisher Scientific in the amount of $13,900. And we have a report by Chief White.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. What we're looking to do tonight is to purchase a cold storage unit for really two main reasons. Number one, to increase the amount of storage space we have, and number two, so we are provided some sort of a notification if the refrigerator or freezer fails. Currently, we have over 5,700 items in our evidence section. Over 200 of those are stored frozen in a freezer, and we have 54 pieces of evidence in a refrigerator. All these numbers are as of last Monday. We also have 190 items that are currently at the state lab, which at some point will be returned back to us. Based on changes to the Idaho Code during this last legislative session, we are required to retain biological evidence for a longer period than we were historically. And so the main reason for this is twofold. Number one, because not only are we running out of storage now, but we can anticipate the need for additional storage space over the next 10 years, and this item will cover that. But secondly, we need a storage unit that will tell us if temperature gets above or below a particular temperature. I think everyone here can imagine the fallout if we were to lose, say, hundreds of pieces of sexual assault evidence or biological evidence from murder cases or something like that. And so we need a evidence freezer that will notify us if the temperature gets too high or too low and we become in danger of losing that biological evidence. We have budget capacity for this within our current budget. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Council questions for Chief?
I so move.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second to approve the police department purchase. Further discussion, Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that was fast. Normally I'm a pill about, going out of the budget for buying things, but in this case, what I see is that we have basically an unfunded mandate from the state that all of a sudden we have to retain biological material for a period of 55 years. And that doesn't count on any of the people whose biological material we're retaining are alive or not, does it?
Not really. Historically, we could get rid of evidence if it was no longer being investigated as a crime, if the victim asked for us to destroy it, if there was no evidence of a crime being committed, and the prosecutor would review those circumstances, and we were able to get rid of the evidence under those circumstances. Currently, under this new statute, we're not allowed to do that. So, yes, part of this is an unfunded mandate by the state. The mandate so we keep this evidence for a bit longer.
It's insane, but we have to do it because I don't want to run the risk, and you talked about it, if the temperature's getting higher or lower, and the risk to us is that that creates a tremendous liability.
Yes, sir, and that part really isn't mandated by the state. That's just good business.
Right. Thank you.
Any further questions for Chief Kiki?
Just a quick thing, I think if you'd revisit this, you expected that the purchase of this would be able to hold a capacity for about 10 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what you were saying? But at that point, you'll know in advance and can budget for proper storage and expansion, right?
Yes, ma'am. Now, just in the interest of full disclosure, this was originally included in our proposed 17-18 budget. However, we do have vacancy savings this year that we can use for this item in order to help our financial situation going forward. We figured it'd be a good idea to purchase it this year.
Thanks.
Any further questions? So if there are no further questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Lee.
Mr. Mayor, this brings up an interesting situation in that occasionally in our budget process, we'll have around the fourth quarter, staff will recognize that there's savings in the budget. And for items that were originally budgeted but popped off, they tend to come back to us. And I'm a stickler for the budget, and I like to see that we stay to the budget. But yet, it seems to me that there should be some method or something in place that says that if there was an item that was on the budget and then got popped off the budget, and now we're coming to the fourth quarter and a department has done a really good job saving money or finding grants or something else, that they should be able to put that item back in the budget without looking like they're going on a spending spree. They're just reestablishing what they did. And I don't know if there's a way we could do that or not, but it seems like there should be some way to handle that. Because the police department has the authority to spend X number of dollars. They've come in under that this year. And now the chief has to come to us in order to purchase things that were originally in his budget, but because we're very conscious about spending money, all of a sudden that authority really isn't there. So now they have to come back to us. And I don't know if there's a way to do that, a priority list. I know Tim has a lot of items. Bill may have items that come up, and they want to purchase these items, but it's not really in the budget, but the money's there. So how do we do that? I don't know.
Well, and I think there's other issues too in that, budgeting, unfortunately, isn't exact science. Things change, and something that you may even have been on your capital list before that got taken off, you could want it later in the year. However, there could be something occurred during the year that requires you to make a capital improvement too. And I believe, and Troy can speak to this too, is that at any request that staff may have, is that there's some discussion through finance and also through admin as to if it's needed to be purchased this year. So Troy, you might just speak on that, because I know you've been working on that for years, and that people hold off on some capital items, but if they do have some room within their budget, that you'll discuss it, and as well as Jim and Sam will discuss it with them.
Yeah, great topic. Thank you, Councilmember Gookin. You will see more of this coming forward, and specifically from this department. You've spent multiple hours looking at the upcoming 2017-2018 financial plan, and there's not a lot of capital in it. I cut over $1.1 million in requests from just the general fund and the library. So as we look to deliver quality service and still keep property taxes reasonable, we scour the budget coming forward in that any dollars that haven't been used, presuming that our cash flow has maintained what the budget said, we come back to you and say, this capital item was not in the budget. Do you see it being a good acquisition? Otherwise, you've not given us permission to go forward and buy that equipment as per the plan that we spend so much time on. So we don't have a great way to do this. We will intermix if the Parks Department is looking for a mower versus a sweeper. We will let those move around because it stays within the capital items that you've approved. But I guarantee you, you will see items from the police department coming back in this fiscal year that were in next year's plan that we did not have room to budget for, and he will be doing that out of savings from personnel.
So I think that's a pretty good process that we just went through here. It came through, did that come through General Services? Came through General Services, and the request is here, so we can all hear it, we can all study it to see whether we feel it's a good purchase. I think that's a fairly good plan. Something that isn't budgeted in capital comes before us, and we can either give it the thumbs up or
And
thumbs
Dan,
down.
can I mention too that on this particular one of the things I thought of was purchasing something that then runs into the next budget year, and there's a subscription sort of thing that was attached to this, which Chief White opted out of getting. So it was totally one purchase within the budget money that he had.
Okay.
But it's good to keep an eye on that.
Thank you.
Those things, yeah. So we'll move on to approval of the resurfacing of the Cherry Hili tennis courts from the Parks Capital Improvement Fund. Bill Greenwood has a report for us. Bill.
So this happens to be just one of those items you're talking about. Happen to have some money in Parks Capital Improvement. We'd like to be able to get those courts surfaced this summer. We had a partner that came forward. Charter Academy gave us $6,500 to help us resurface these, so we thought we'd take advantage of it. The money is in the Parks Capital and the impact fees, and so we're just looking for your approval. It went through all the vetting that you all just discussed.
So Bill, that goes through, so this purchase would start in the Park and Recs Commission, right?
Correct.
And then it would go to General Services, then it would come before
And prior to
us.
that, I spoke to Troy about it, and we, worked it out and moved forward through the process, and we're here this evening.
Okay. So questions for Bill on this item?
If we,
Go ahead.
if we approve tonight, what would the timeline be?
We want to pull a trigger for September. So
But it'd
then
still
this year. So we have a
be-
really big pickleball tournament this latter part of August. And so as soon as they're done, we'll lock them down and get the courts resurfaced. They need warm, dry temperatures.
You know, we were talking about pickleball. I went by the pickleball court that's off of Atlas there, and they're having some kind of tournament there. I've never seen so many
I know.
pickleballers.
That park is, since we put that in the dog park, it was a kind of a little unknown park, and it wasn't used very much, the neighborhood, but now it's a destination park, and we have people there all the time.
Other questions for Bill? Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So was this one of these items that was originally in the budget, or?
It was not in the budget, really. I was going to budget for it, and for next year and have to wait. It's pretty thin, and it was suggested to me that since the money's in Parks Capital, just bring it to you now and not I was going to put it in for the fiscal budget we're working on now. And they said, well, it's there, why wait? It was Bonnie's idea, so we said, yeah, let's go ahead and get it done this year.
Did the funding from charter help move that along then?
Pardon me?
The money, there's $6,500 coming in from charter.
We have it
That help?
already. Yeah, we have it.
I think Dan's question was, did that help make the decision to move it along faster because that money was available?
Well, I could have held it. It was just that I was going to wait to budget for it, and it wouldn't have, it just helps us do it earlier. I mean, it would have been the same, I would have put it in the budget, or I'm here tonight asking for it to get it done this September. They're pretty thin, and so we were hoping to get on it. It's been 2005, and usually those courts will, depending on play, last about 10-ish years. We're a little bit beyond that, so it's pretty thin. And there's some spots that are beginning to spald a little bit, and we're hoping to minimize that. And if we wait another winter, it might create more damage. So I think to be more prudent to do it sooner is a good idea.
Other questions for Bill? If not, we'd be looking for council
I
action.
shall move.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Bill. We'll move on to other business. We have resolution number 17-047, approval of amendment to the encroachment agreement with 418 East Lakeside LLC. And Tim Martin has a report for us. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Back in October of last year, we came forward in Public Works and into council early November with an agreement with the Innovation Den, the old Elks Lodge, that to be able to put in a second access for ADA access for that property. In that agreement, it said that we would allow up to 5 feet of that right-of-way. So, right there is the exhibit that you had in your council staff, or your council agenda. I've highlighted where the property line is on there in red. As you can see, on the lakeside or north side of that building, that landing zone and patio is all within their property line. Where we're looking at tonight is what's on the east side of the building next to 5th Street. And you can see from that picture there that right in here, this is the wall of their of the patio. It connects and wraps around and comes back down. This total area here is a little over, I believe it is 25 feet. And what we're looking tonight for is an amendment to the original encroachment permit and to give them an additional, it's right around 9 inches of encroachment onto that sidewalk. For you to see it, the landing, if you can see over here on the right-hand side, this 1.1 feet of property which is the landing itself, the patio is encroaching over the line by 14 inches or so. But when you take it and wrap it around and bring it down to the pad, this right in here represents how far out of the boundary of our original agreement. It's 0.8 of a foot, or approximately 9 inches. This walkway, the ADA access here onto the patio, is actually only 20 feet, which is underneath what the original landing encroachment was. But when you take this here and add it to the total, that's where you're getting the 25 feet that's out of compliance. We visited with a representative from the Innovation Den. Once it became aware to my department, we went out and visited. We looked at making sure we still had accessibility on the eastern side of that landing to make sure that we still had ADA access, and we're well within ADA access at that point. So we came, once it was apparent that we were going to have to redo this agreement and amend it, we brought a representative in, we chatted. We wanted to make sure that our constituents as citizens were getting a value out of what we felt would be reasonable here for this. So in the new agreement, it states that, we want them to provide us the materials to do the other 3 corners. And with our engineers' blessing, we wanted to move this bench and this trash receptacle a little farther forward towards the curb that wouldn't impede any issues there, but would give a little extra room. And this is kind of looking north here. That is the walkway that's left here, and we're well over 48 inches even to the pavers or the tree grates. So with that, I would entertain any questions, Mayor.
Questions for Tim? Wood?
So Tim, this ramp is to access the building or just
It's a
the deck?
secondary access off the front of the building. If, let me see, I don't have it in there. Maybe you can see it in the original picture here. The main entrance is the stairway into this cove up here, and the secondary, this wraps around into another access
Okay.
off of it.
And they went this direct or forward towards Lakeside rather than going backwards for any particular reason?
This side here, council member, is within their property lines. They're not asking for anything on this side. It's this side here, in order to get the compliance and to be able to put that ADA ramp in, is where the encroachment lies.
Okay, thanks.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, I see what you're saying, Woody, is that the ramp turns northward, and why didn't it go south? Because I think it would be too steep if it was going south, because that already slopes up. Tim, so what happens is someone wants to, not just these guys, but anyone, they want to build something that's outside of their property, which means it's going to encroach upon city property, our sidewalk. So we grant them a permission to do so. And after that, and that's based on plans that they submitted to us. After that, could you go over the process of what takes place so that when we hand them, or they hand us plans that say, we're only going to go X number of feet, and now in this picture and today, it's X number of feet plus 9 inches, how does it get from there to there?
Some of the process in which we go through in DRT and we scrub things, internally, projects like this are brought up. And our building department would be managing anything that's attached to and/or the building. My understanding is our building department made the contractor or developer aware that it was outside the scope of work. From there, I can't tell you, we didn't do a stop permit, we didn't, we continued to move it forward until we got to this spot. And working with the deputy administrator, these are things that we've got to work on internally so it doesn't happen and bring it to you to make you make a decision that, that you shouldn't have to do. We should do that internally. We did have this same situation somewhat on the Parkside building, just across here. We, several years ago, came forward. There wasn't enough room to get the stairways in, and we did an encroachment permit with them at that time to allow them to encroach into that sidewalk. And that's the only one that I'm aware of.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add really quick, so just so the community's aware of the process as well. This is a bit of a unique situation, but typically the way it works is they go through a permitting process, we approve plans, and then they work. And then at some point they will call for an inspection, and our staff will go out and review whatever the work has been done and look at the plan and compare it. And so typically at that point, that's when we're going to catch these issues. And it's going to be when they're seeking what's called a temporary certificate of occupancy. It's when they want to move into the building and actually use it. And so in this case, we did catch it earlier than our typical process, and we informed them that it could be wrong. At that point, it's a private business decision where to move from there. So in that case, we informed them when we got to the point of temporary certificate of occupancy, then it came back and we said it is too large. And so that now we're working to address that. So we're trying to find a good balance, and the way we found that balance in this case is they have agreed, and we appreciate that, providing additional public improvements that would have otherwise not been required. And so that is what we're bringing forward this evening.
Well, it's very frustrating to me because we're inspecting and we're looking at footings, and I know we inspect footings. And it would be pretty damn obvious looking at this that the footings are not where they said they would be toward the plans. And it seems like we just have a lack of fortitude when it comes to telling someone to rip something out and put it in the way they promised they would put it in the original plans. And I will once again cite the two buildings in my neighborhood, the two homes that are exactly 12 inches apart, in which case both of them should be at least 10 feet from each other. Somehow, someone drops the ball and the word gets out that the city is going to go ahead and wink, wink, let you get away with it as long as you just play nice. And it seems like we do this forever. And it's not, how are we going to change things if you're like, okay, well, we'll let these guys go through. But we've let them all go through. Every single one has gone through because they know the city, wink, wink, doesn't really pay attention and doesn't really hold anyone's feet to the fire when someone presents plans and then, oops, now we're 9 inches out. And now all of a sudden our building that we gave our plans to the city and said we're building it this way, we actually built it the other way.
And those are all fair points, and we really appreciate that as staff. And we do need to probably have an internal discussion. That's what we've started, as Tim noted, regarding certain points of the process, how we can ensure that we're providing better customer service to them to ensure that they do it the right way the first time, that we're protecting the community interest, and then also to note that we do have checks and balances, so that's why this is coming forward to you. So they're not going to receive that TCO unless you're okay with what's occurring. You might say, we don't agree with this agreement, tear it out and redo it.
It sounds like you're just making us the bad guys because you didn't want to make the decision earlier, and I'm referring to you as the entire staff, building department, everyone, didn't want to make the decision earlier to say, tear it out, you did it wrong. So you kick it up to us after the thing is almost done and they're opening and they're ready and they're waiting for their TCO, and now the city council gets to be the bad guys when the city should have done the job earlier and red tagged them, which you said they didn't do. They didn't red tag them, so they should have red tagged them and told them to tore it out when they inspected the footings.
And we appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Amy?
One of the hot topics this winter at Bike and Peg Committee was accessibility for individuals in wheelchairs along Sherman. And there was a lot of discussion about that. Is the 48 inches is what's required there, you said?
42 is what
What's
the
re-
minimum
Okay.
is.
And moving that bench and garbage can, you said?
It's just going to give a little extra, we've got more than enough access.
Okay, so my concern is with snowfall and a fairly narrow sweep, we could still have accessibility to get the wheelchair down.
I would hope so.
Okay.
We, as a department, we plow our snow to the center
Okay,
and pick it up downtown area.
okay.
Dan?
You know, and I'm not sure how the process went and how the plan got changed, but I guess as I look at it now, as far as, you know, what makes sense, and not being a building official, but I've dealt with ramps a lot, from everything from access to polling sites and Habitat for Humanity, and, you know, it comes to a kind of a certain math thing that if you don't want to have a higher grade than whatever it is, and if you got to go up X amount of feet, then you have to have it X amount of runway, and either have to stretch it out along the building, which it sounds like that was the original intent, but in order to get enough length, they did that. And I have to say, from a citizen access point or whatever, if they're actually, for the people who are actually going to use it, I think it makes a lot more sense to have it right where it, you know, that entry and exit is, versus just about down to the alley. And, you know, that's not saying that, you know, we got to follow the process and all of that, but as far as what ended up, and I don't know if that's, if they had somebody at some point that said, oh, no, it makes more sense to wrap around, but anyway, I think the final product is, you know, probably a good one, but, and, you know, aside from that specific issue, which, I mean, is legitimate, but I mean, actually just today, as I was walking by there, you know, put an ad in on the used truck and thinking, man, what a great thing that this has, you know, kind of rejuvenated down there and going to be an asset. And so, yeah, we've got to follow the rules, and it sounds like they're going to have some compensation, but I think we've got to have some flex. But yeah, I'd rather you cut it early, too.
Ron?
Yeah, Mike, have you had discussion on this issue with the owners and,
Yes, we have.
That's not a lawyer answer.
Answer the question.
well,
Well, so they came in, I think it's been portrayed the way Tim and Sam have portrayed it. We do have the option of saying you did it wrong, tear it out. I think looking at it from a staff perspective, it is wider than it was, which makes it more usable for people actually going to use the ramp. So I think there's justification on that side of it. The access on the sidewalk still meets ADA compliance. So it was, yes, we've been involved, and there are remedies that we could pursue if we wanted to, say, take it all out.
okay, if we say, you know, take it all out and start over by the original agreement, do you have, or Tim, do you have what a cost factor would be?
We heard during the discussions with a representative, they felt it was around $15,000.
How much?
15,000?
Well, I kind of agree with Mr. Gookin that, you know, we've got rules, and you're supposed to abide by them, and then you go ahead and you start building something, and you put it, you get a little off on one side, and then you come back and you say to the city, hey, I'm sorry, but, and then we as a city say, hey, we'll turn our back this time, but next time you got to do it right. And, over the years, I've seen too many of these instances happen. And so I think that, although I think it's a great project that they're doing and it, all this, but I think they have to follow the rules.
So Tim, if we clarify the decision that we're making tonight, if you want to go back to that one picture where it shows that what they did was that they built that ramp along the side of the building 9 inches too wide, right? Is that the decision where they made it?
So let me back up a little bit and go to this very first picture, and then I'll go back to it, Mayor. This wall here is all within their property line.
So they're good. So
They're good
that front
there.
deck is good.
The north.
Now, if you go here, this line from here to here, going back, is 1.1 feet out of their property line. If you look at this picture here, this is the Reds' property. Here's that wall we're talking about.
Okay.
It's within the 5 feet of 28 feet, but we, in the original agreement, said you only had 25 feet that you could work outside and encroach into our sidewalk.
So what is the total distance to the east that they're over what our agreement was in October? How far over are they?
9 inches.
So they're 9 inches over. And you guys have negotiated with them that for some financial compensation, basically, is that they're going to, right now, they're improving that whole entire corner? Is that correct?
They've already done that, but that is not in this agreement.
Okay.
That is,
But they've agreed to supply materials for the other three corners.
What,
The other 3 corners in that intersection.
oh, across the street.
yes,
Yeah.
and side and other side.
Right, okay.
That's it.
Tim, what is the value of that?
Each one of those ped corners is about $700 a piece in materials, which is the truncated, the cast iron domes, and things like that.
So Dan, English.
So, yeah, I guess it's still coming together in my head. If you go back to the sketch, the drafting, so is that the original plan? So I guess I was
No.
thinking maybe the original plan was one long ramp and.
No, it was still the same, sir. I mean,
Like
this
this.
isn't the original. This is the exhibit brought forward to the next one. The original was in the original that came to council last November.
Right, but
And
was it one long ramp or did it have this?
No, it
wrapper?
had the U. I mean,
Oh, okay,
but they said they would stay within 5 feet
right,
of
okay.
our-
But so the design, I mean, the basic design was the same, it's just a little wider. Okay, okay, that,
So Tim, let's go back to October, and let's say that they came to us with the plan that is exactly how they built it, right? So in other words, they had that extra 9 inches in the plan. We're speculating a little bit, but what would staff's reaction have been to that plan? Would they have looked at that plan and said, okay, they want to build it this big, we have 48 inches, so we're ADA compliant, we're good? What would have staff's
I think
basically
that
attitude towards
you
it?
said it perfectly. My staff is going to go out and look at the right-of-way and make sure that we have traffic pedestrian flow in and around what they gave us, and we made sure that we had ADA compliance on every corner as we went around that piece of
So
that
the-
diagram.
So the sticking point to your decision back in October was that the ADA requirements be met. So if they had come to you and said in October that their plan was 9 inches wider than what they said, you would have looked, okay, they are ADA compliant, we would have probably recommended it.
We would have brought it forward to you that way with the recommendation.
But I certainly see Dan Gookin's issue is that, rules are rules. And I think we have to, at some point in time, we're going to have to draw a line in the sand sometimes with these. So Kiki.
And Dan's been here, and so is Ron longer than I, but what is the ratio? You kind of said that every single one of these is negotiated, but I kind of recall a business across the street that got red tagged and nobody negotiated. They made them redo everything and pulled it all down. So I don't know if that's a fact, that every single error in building that's red tagged is negotiated out, and they're allowed to do that. It happened in your neighborhood, and Ron said he remembers them, but in just my time here, I remember a lot of red tags that held up, and the owners had to pull out things that they had put in and had to put in roof structures the way they were supposed to be. So I have a hard time saying, I have no facts on that every single one is being negotiated. And to me, a mistake was made. The builder came back and said, I'll offer something up to correct that mistake. And the reality is, had that mistake been presented, that mistake as a plan been presented, it would have been approved anyway, because nothing about it would have caused us to not approve it last October, whether it's 9 inches wide. They just built their wall out 1.5 foot, which pushed their ramp out. So, I believe rules are rules, but I also don't have any real facts saying that these rules are perpetually broken. I know that they are and negotiated, but to what extent, I don't have that in front of me, so.
They had the plans. They had plans that they gave to the city. And I understand, I do woodworking, I build stuff. You can be off a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch. 9 inches is someone giving us the finger, seriously. And I don't think,
To what
maybe it
advantage,
wasn't their
though?
intention of doing
I
that.
don't know. I
But we
don't
should
tend
have
to believe
stopped them,
that.
and we didn't. And so we also have that to do. So like I said earlier, we got to be the bad guys now when staff should have followed the rules and red tagged them and said, tear it out. There's another example in my neighborhood of where the footings were wrong and they were too close. And they didn't. Building department didn't red tag them. They just went ahead and made them put in the house. It's crooked as hell, but they made them put it in.
Jim, you had a point that you wanted to make.
Your Honor, I'd like to put a broader perspective on this issue. First of all, in response to Councilman Gookin and Councilman Miller pointed that out, we correct a lot of issues every day as we inspect structures throughout the city, and we do red tag. There was a mistake made. Both parties share in that mistake. But in the broader perspective, this is a building that has been sitting vacant for 20 years. This is a building that isn't collecting taxes. It's not contributing to our downtown. Let's look 5 years from now and see what difference that 9 inches will make. Probably none at all. If the council wants to chastise me as the chief executive, and I'll take responsibility for any issues that our staff did in error, that's fine. But I don't see a lot of value in asking people to tear that out, regardless of the price. They're done. Let's get that thing moving forward, and let's get it to be a productive part of our downtown.
Other questions for Tim? Tim, did you have something else you wanted to offer?
If I may, in your packet is the staff report from Chris and the new amended encroachment permit. And on that first page, it talks to all the things that, the developer or the contractor said, as far as he was made aware that it's not meeting, it encroaches in greater degree than what was allowed. I mean, he is coming forward and saying, I know I messed up, and, can we go forward?
So if I am interpreting what Jim had to say is that there is some shared responsibility here of which some of it is the contractor and some of it is the city, on how we got to this point.
And now we're at a point of not asking you to be the bad guy, but we've tried to work out an agreement that benefits the city and allows the project to move forward. And so that's not asking you to be the bad guy, that's asking you to approve the agreement that we've worked on to make this still of benefit to the city and to that development.
But don't you agree that you also put us in this position because staff didn't red tag it and tell them to pull it out when they noticed the footings were poured in the wrong spot?
If that's what happened, you're absolutely correct. That's when we should have acted. That was at a point, quite frankly, where there was a transition in the engineering department, and I think that's where it got lost.
So it's still our fault. But if we're going to be serious about code enforcement in this city, and you mentioned that this is a good project, which of course is neither here, shouldn't be here nor there, because code enforcement shouldn't really depend on where a project's located or who's doing it or whether the building has been abandoned or whether we're going to get more property tax dollars. Code enforcement should be taken seriously all across the level. And unless you want to draw up a list of where code enforcement is okay to just kind of slip on by, then I don't believe that.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Sure.
Councilman Gookin, what I would respond is exactly what you said. It's our fault. We missed it when we didn't catch it in the footings. So because we missed it, we can't go back on them also. It's just as much our fault as it is theirs. We bear equal responsibility in that mix-up in terms of those 9 inches. So if you say that now we should go back, I've always felt that if we as a city screw up, we have to own up to it, and that's why, and we did in this instance, and that's why we tried to work out something that is mutually beneficial and resolves the issue. Because it's just as much our error in not catching it back then as it is the contractor. And I truly believe it's not an issue of giving us the finger as much as it's an issue of they screwed up when they were putting it together.
I think we screwed up, and I'd like to make a motion. And I'd like to make a motion that the city direct them to reconstruct that ramp per the original drawings and that the city pay for it.
Okay, so we have a motion. Any second on that motion? Okay, so that motion has no second, so we'll move on. Amy?
Mr. Mayor, being that we share responsibility for this error and that the sidewalk can still accommodate the bike and ped flow and allow for ADA movement through there, I'd like to make a motion that we move to approve resolution number 17-047, approval of an amendment to the encroachment with 418 East Lakeside LLC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? We'll go to Dan English, and we'll come back.
We're getting more, or as much into philosophy and things, but I guess I need to state my case that I really don't see it as being on mark to be talking about, I guess, and it's worrying about who's the bad guys, and frankly, if we sit in one of these chairs, we have the responsibilities that go along with the job, and, it's not, the staff is one thing and we're something else. We're all part of it, and, I think this is a reasonable compromise, but again, I think it's really misdirected to be getting into who's the bad guys or not, and I'm not worried about if I have to take a hard stand sometime, so.
Okay. Oh, Kiki, did
My only other thing was that there was nothing really discussed in this about the street tree that's there. So I don't know if that came up during conversations and how it might be affected, so.
The street tree is fine.
Okay.
Everything's good there.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Dan, I think we are going to be the bad guys. The buck stops here. So whether we're the good guys or the bad guys is an opinion, but the buck has to stop here. We have to make the decisions. And I would just say that I will be opposing this because I believe that a yes vote on this would be affirmation by council that code enforcement doesn't really matter. And I know that there will be people who disagree with that up here, but that's the way I see it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Wood?
So trying to find a happy medium here, I get what you've been through and all that. I think when it gets to this point, when it's gone through admin, it's gone through engineering, and no matter who's at fault, kind of buck stops here, we keep things going. But it does kind of open the door to maybe think about, maybe we need to raise the bar here. You and I have talked about all the little things that go on in construction and architects and engineers, and you have to have their stamp, and yet our guys put lots and lots of hours on finding mistakes on people who are professionals, and then the contractors have to build it. That bothers me, and I can go on and on about it, but it's kind of, this raises the whole subject matter that's saying, you know, maybe we need to raise the bar on checking on things better. You know, I understand where Dan's at. I just don't necessarily agree with going in your direction, Dan, but I do see the issue needs to be addressed. We need to get a little more serious about this, whether it's the building department or whoever. It doesn't even matter. You know, we talked about streets this week, you know, how things are done when they're using our money. And when it's not right, we seem to be able to roll over on it. And I would like to be just a little more proactive and just keep it moving. So I'm going to support this. It's not an easy one, but I think it's the right one.
Your Honor,
Yes.
thank you. With regard to Councilman McGovern's comments, between Tim and Sam and I, we have had those exact discussions, and we truly are endeavoring to raise that bar.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
No.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
No.
Motion carried. Now we will move to the fiscal year 2016-2017 update. Troy has a presentation for us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are into the final quarter of the 2016-2017 fiscal year. You have spent quite a bit of time looking at the 2017-2018 financial plan. A quick overview would be the fact that we're 3/4 of the way through this year, and things are tracking very well. Your department heads are doing an excellent job of overseeing their budgets that you had approved for them. They are coming back to you, as you've seen, and you will see a few of them come back even more as we finish up this year. If I look back a year ago on what cash and investments the city of Coeur d'Alene would have in the different accounts, we'd have about $5 million more than we do today. The good news is all of those dollars that have been spent were through the general obligation bond, and therefore your cash balances are tracking just as they should. You are not spending more money than your cash flow is, and all the dedicated accounts are where they should be. So we do this on a monthly basis. You see this frequently. I will share with you that the 9 months ending June 30th, there is one more payroll that needs to slide in here, and that would bring up most of the departments right around that 3/4 or 75% of the percent expended. You've had quite a busy year. If I drop you down to the police department capital outlay, that should ring a bell that what we did in the police department this fiscal year was took savings that they had from last year and they went in and bought capital. Your fire department is spending the dollars that they have available. Most of that 951% of budget would be from your general obligation bonds so that we don't put in the budget year over year dollars that have been dedicated and allocated. You will see a similar type category coming up, and that would be general government. Normally, we'd spend about $94,725. Why have we spent $376,397? We have been busy working on a mill site. You have made a down payment on a mill site. There's also a little project that sits in there right now called City Hall remodel. Those are all dedicated dollars that sit in your general fund as per your request to be paid out of. So we will bust that line item majorly, and at the end of the year, we'll square it up with the cash that we have as per the plan that you've directed us to deliver. Looking at all the other different accounts, everything is flowing along nicely. We are not surprised by some of the areas, cemetery and those types of things really dial it up in the summertime. Parks does the same thing, recreation does the same thing. So in a quick synopsis, we're very, very busy. Capital outlay is really happening right now with all the different projects across the city, and so these dollars will be expended. The good news is we're not counting on cash flow here. These would be dollars that we have in the bank, so we will square that up the last meeting of this fiscal year as we balance a budget. We'll amend the budget, and I will share with you that you have had the cash to do all of this. So again, looking at the enterprise funds, everything is flowing along nicely in there as well. So I don't really have any big ones other than the ones we just talked about that are way over budget, way out of line. When we look at the cash, we disclose all of this. It's all dedicated and all the good things that go with that. Same thing with the capital projects. Anything such as the first line item on the street projects, that will be squared up with cash, probably from impact fees as we move those over as the projects continue to use money. Will stay in that budget. We're just pulling this at the end of 9 months and saying that that fund at that moment has the wrong type of positive number next to it, but we have the cash to square that up. So I'm going to mix in here a little bit of where we've been. You spent over 2 hours, and thank you for your time on the budget workshop. We are proposing, in just a little bit, that you take 0% increase in property taxes. This is what your history has been on property taxes. We're forecasting over $4 million in foregone. Foregone property taxes is not a bank account, unfortunately. It's a dollar amount that one could use. So it's allocated, but it's not real money. That is what the constituents of the city of Coeur d'Alene have not had to pay that you could take over the entirety that we've had that available.
Troy, I might just add on our foregone, I believe that we are number 2 or number 3 in the state of Idaho for the largest foregone balance, maybe even number 2.
And we could move up this year as we take a 0%, so
Right.
yes.
So the history over the last dozen or more years is that that foregone balance has increased because they've taken small property tax increases. Would you agree with that?
Zeros are a very small increase, yes.
But it's accumulated over a long period of time.
It is, it is. And it shows your stewardship, it shows the way in which you look at all the expenses and why we will be coming back to you as a staff, seeking any dollars we can get this fiscal year because we have the cash on hand from cash flow. So I'll let that one go for just a minute.
Okay.
This is what the city of Coeur d'Alene had in its fund balance. Rainy day fund is another name for this at the beginning of this fiscal year, $8.7 million. That's 20% of the general fund as it was amended. That is healthy. The Government Finance Officers Association would say that's healthy. Your finance director would say that is healthy, and that is good news. Why is that good news? Because as of today, in the city of Coeur d'Alene, our fund balance is below $6 million. And you ask, how can that be? Well, we are now using our cash because we are looking for a property tax check to come from Kootenai County, and it will be showing up later this month. So we have a significant cash flow at the city of Coeur d'Alene. Your upcoming financial plan will indicate that your general fund and your library combined is a little over $40 million for the year. Right? Over $40 million. So this is close to what's going on in your personal checkbooks, I'm sure. On a daily basis, the city of Coeur d'Alene in the next year will be spending over $109,000 a day, each and every day. So when we look at this fund balance and we look at our expenses per day, we're able to fund the city with no cash flow in the general fund and the library, just those categories, for 80 days. That's good. That's over 2 months. However, we are moving to lower this fund balance. You have about $890,000 in this $8.7 million that is dedicated. A good chunk of that is for the remodel of City Hall. You also have dedicated the remaining dollars necessary for City Hall remodel out of your fund balance. So I don't anticipate the fund balance growing at all this year to grow that number. I think you'll see police back here. I think we'll be using up all the cash that we may have in excess of what we anticipated into this fourth quarter, because the budget is real tight for next year as well. So I would estimate that we'd have 8.7 million without any of those things going on. So I anticipate that if the City Hall remodel is done, and we are at the end of the fiscal year, if that all tied together perfectly, we would have about $6.2 million in our fund balance. The percentage would move to about 15.6, which is still in a tolerable range. But again, when I say $6 million, wouldn't we all like to have a few $6 million lying around? But I'm talking about a $40 million budget. So the 80 days that we can run on our cash flow right now moves down to 57 days as we chew into your fund balance. I sometimes have at least 35 to 40 days that we need to have in the event that the county check hasn't come in. And we have not had to do a tax anticipation note, which is where we'd have to go borrow money to fund our payroll as we wait for that big check.
I think someone's pounding their heads on the wall. Troy, you mentioned that money's coming in from the county, so that's the property tax money that we just paid, or some people paid on in June. Okay. And just friendly notice to everyone out there, that's the county. You send your check to the county, not to us.
And if they don't cash it, it's not us sitting on it.
Yes, that's true. Thank you,
The county
Dan.
treasurer.
Thank you. You did read the letter to the editor.
Yeah,
Any
Troy,
questions on that?
Troy, what does the accountant suggest having in fund balance?
The recommendation hovers at that 60-plus day mark. So as a percentage, it's right around this 11, 12, 13 as a minimum basis. In other words, we couldn't operate for 60 days with our cash because every city is going to be different. So in the early teens of your fund balance percentage, having cash on hand. You go into single digits, you have a very thin margin for error not having enough cash to operate. Like 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 or less percent. There's not a lot of cash to operate. So blending in a little bit of the look forward. Your 2017-2018 citywide personnel changes are captured here. You worked on this, and I'll bring you up to date on what we're looking for to set the high water mark for the 2017-2018 budget. Council, you touched all of these. Not a lot in the way of new personnel and not a lot in the way of new equipment going into the general fund and or the library. Lots of part-time and squaring things up. Quick little look, the newspaper does this regularly, looks current plan to the new plan. We will be down in the general fund budget. Why is that? Mainly because of general obligation bond things. We're also slowing down a little bit at the wastewater treatment plant. Awesome news, no increase to the city or the employees in the health plan. Again, zero. Cost of living in the general fund and library is almost $550,000. Merit increases of over $350,000. $178,000 there. So we looked at the big swings. You've gone through all of this. You'll get to see this again the first meeting in September. Capital projects will swing our total budget in a major way. We can't keep building all of those roads in one given year, so it does ebb and flow on those capital projects. An okay year for the city of Coeur d'Alene in new growth, new construction. We are proposing in your next year's financial plan that you take these dollars. They're very crucial to our ongoing success. And in the wisdom in 2016 to work that de-annexation has paid great benefits, and thank you for your wisdom and stewardship on doing that. 2015 was quite a year for new construction dollars. This is continuing repeated income, crucial to a service business that has 84% of its budget in people and the accompanying expenses. So these are the big movers in our cash flow year over year. We thank the new growth, highway user tax, sales tax, liquor tax. The state is doing well, so that is up over $300,000. Franchise fees look solid, and annexation fees. So the hesitation in the financial plan that you will be setting a high water mark for is the fact that annexation fees do not repeat ongoing, and so relying on them to fund our operations is a challenge. So the way that we look at that, we being finance, we take these annexation fees, match them up to what your capital is, and say we have one-time annexation fees to pay for that capital, and match it up that way so that we don't run into that brick wall of lacking in cash flow while having the staff. And with a quick 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year update, I would stand for any questions.
Troy, I have a question on new growth. We were just talking about this building that's going to come online, and it's a substantial investment in that building and a substantial increase in the taxable value of that building. How are those captured? So when they gave you the new growth number to calculate that number, this building had not gotten its occupancy permit yet. So I'm assuming that that building is not included in that. So from the time that we set our budget for the whole balance of the year, is that something that's done later in the year? Is there an adjustment done? How are those, because they're going to pay increased property taxes, new building that come online in 2017. How does that revenue come back to the city?
Well, that's an easy example because the base value has already been set as per the urban renewal district that overlays that area, and any of the new valuation will go to the urban renewal district until 2021.
We don't get
Dan,
squat.
Dan's already had a night, so
I
let's
understand
not.
that.
Let's not. do that. But so let's say it's outside of the urban renewal.
Okay, thank you. Technically, it's when it comes onto the tax rolls, and so the assessor works through that. Obviously, the certificate of occupancy is the key driver in that, and then when it hits their new rolls. So we would probably not see that building, should it have been outside the urban renewal district, till next year.
So do they catch it up so the new growth number that you were given for property taxes this year, it may have included some things that weren't on the rolls of the number they gave you last year?
Correct. You're absolutely correct.
Questions for Troy on the budget? You guys have put a lot of work in on this.
Just one, Troy, when you were talking about employees, we were adding 6 or 7. What is the total full-time equivalents? Do we have a grand number?
Oh, absolutely do, sir.
I just didn't bring my book.
6.27.
You have, for the increase or for the total city?
Total, 350, 360?
96.72 we're proposing across the city, right? Is that the question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions for Troy? So Troy, you're looking for the approval of the high water mark is what you're looking for tonight,
I'm going
correct?
to transition to that, but yes.
Okay, eventually, all right.
Well, that's just an update.
So we have worked with you, council, and your staff for quite a few hours to bring forward a high water mark. To me, it means a indication to our constituents what our plan is with the property taxes. And I say it that way because these numbers are tough to do in the month of July for a September 1 start date and changes that are actually taking place like 10 minutes ago. So what I am bringing to you tonight would be a request to set the high water mark a little higher than what we put in the resolution because of changes. So I know that's a little bit out of the ordinary. However, it helps as we, staff, look through the revenues. In other words, we won't be able to spend more money than what we take in. And in so doing, we had put $100,000 into that resolution because we weren't sure if the new growth number would be correct. So it is being locked down, and unfortunately, it will not be a whole lot more than what we had estimated. In fact, it'll be a little bit less. But in so doing, we also had a number of changes that we looked at with you on positions. In that, we have modified a proposal that you've asked us to look at, which would be raises for council, and you need to make a decision on that at a later date. Doesn't have to be today, but we've included $8,578 for that. At the last budget workshop, we worked with the department, the police department, and removed $138,211 in vehicles and added a detective position for 82. We added a part-time reference clerk to the library for $17,522. We are working that annexation fee fund to make this whole thing balance. That's one of the big variables. And we are moving the acquisition of a rubber-tired excavator until next year. And we have a additional request coming in from administration supporting a public works inspector in the street department, which ties pretty nicely into the previous conversation of $76,372. So I know that's not the ideal way to roll these numbers out, but we were doing them as late as today. So basically, Mayor and Council, I would propose that you set the high water mark at $89,467,942. The biggest takeaway is 0% increase in property taxes. I guarantee that number will not be the number a year from now, but it won't be higher than that because I'm running out of cash in order to fund anything else creatively based on estimates in July, attempting to set a September 1 start date.
It could be higher, though, if like more sales tax came in, more liquor tax, couldn't it?
It could, because then we will have dollars and we'll amend for that.
Okay.
So again, I'm taking code and simplifying it to, are we taking a 0, 1, 2, 3, a 1.5, a 2.5, or 3.5, which we can't do unless we went into foregone. I think that's what this should all be about. However, Vonnie Jensen, a phenomenal accountant, wants it all to balance and be perfect and come up with a whole number so we can do a resolution. So that's my goal tonight, is to modify that number a little bit, capturing what you had talked about at the workshop and capturing a recommendation coming in from administration on one position.
Questions for Troy?
So you had 89,491,570, but you're saying it's 89,476,
467,
467.
942, and you ask why. The biggest difference in there was I was buffering it by $100,000, maybe hoping positively that new growth would come in way more than what the estimate was from Kootenai County. And it does not look to be anywhere near that. In fact, I anticipate it being $1,990 less.
Damn them.
Pretty close.
Other questions for Troy? So I guess if there's no other questions, Dan?
I would be willing to make a motion to approve Resolution 17051, setting the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2017-18 at $89,467,942 and scheduling a public hearing for September 5th of this year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Just wanted to say that even though this budget does include an increase in elected official salaries, we have to discuss that and vote on that separately. So those of you who want to yell at us for that, there will be a meeting later.
Any further discussion on that?
Make sure you bring fruits and vegetables, please.
So roll call, please, Renata?
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yep.
English,
Yes.
Eddinger,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Troy.
That next meeting when I'm out of town, that'd be a good one.
Nice job, Dan.
So we move on to our public hearings. This is a quasi judicial hearing, ZC-2-17. It's a zone change from R12 to R17 at 721 East Spokane Avenue. As per the rules of the quasi judicial hearing, I ask the council if they have any conflict of interest. In this case, no one has a conflict of interest. There is a sign-up sheet for people that wish to testify as we get along into the program a little bit, and we will start with a staff report. Tammy Stroud.
All right, thank you, Mayor and council members. So this evening, again, we have a request for a zone change from R12 to R17. The applicant is Brenny Ross, and the location is 721 East Spokane Street. This is the location map that describes where it is. It's on the north side of Spokane Street, outlined here in the red. It's on the east side of 7th Street and west of Cayley Court. So under general information in your staff report, this is a 1-acre parcel. It's approximately 43,560 square feet. If the requested zone change is approved, Mr. Ross intends on constructing a multifamily project on the site. The subject property, as noted here on the location map, is currently vacant, and the owner is utilizing the on-site timber to construct fencing around the perimeter of the property. And I'll go through the 4 required findings for this request for a zone change this evening. Finding B8, that the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. The subject property located within this vicinity falls within the stable established area in the 2007 comprehensive plan in the Northeast Prairie area. Northeast Prairie is typically a stable established housing area with a mix of zoning districts. The majority of the area has been developed. Special care should be given to the areas that remain, such as the Nettleton Gulch area, protecting the beauty and the value of the hillside and wetlands. So the characteristics of the Northeast Prairie neighborhoods are located in your staff report on page 3, as well as the comprehensive plan, goals, and objectives. Finding B9, that the public facilities and utilities are not available and adequate for the proposed use. So I'll summarize the staff comments that are provided in your staff report on page 6. As far as traffic in streets, the additional traffic generated as a result of the zone change is expected to be minor and easily accommodated on the existing street. Frontage improvements will be required at the time of development, and that comment was provided by Chris Bosley, our city engineer. As far as water, the public water system has adequate capacity and can provide adequate service as long as the code requirements have been met. Additional requirements, services such as hydrants, will be installed at the developer's expense. Sewer reported, presently public sewer is within Spokane Avenue, and the city's wastewater utility presently has the wastewater system and capacity and willingness to serve this zone change request as proposed, and that was from Mike Becker with wastewater. And the fire department would be reviewing the project if it came in as a final plat or during a site development or a building permit. They would utilize the currently adopted International Fire Code for compliance, and they would address all concerns at the site and building permit submittals. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site do or do not make it suitable for the request at the time. There are no topographical or physical constraints on the subject property at this time. And I've included some site photos that I'll review slightly or briefly for you. This is a site photo of the view of the subject property from Spokane Street, looking northeast toward the NIC Armory building and the duplex housing neighborhood to the east. So this is the Armory building. And then just to the east of it, there are duplex houses. This is a view of the subject property looking northwest toward the NIC Armory building and toward the single-family homes. So again, this is the Armory building, and to the west of the subject property, there are single-family homes. This is a view of the subject property from Spokane Street looking north toward the NIC Armory building. And as I mentioned earlier, there's some materials on site because they were building the fences. Finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect the surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. And I mentioned earlier in my presentation that the street could accommodate the zone change if it were to happen and go to an R17 zoning. This is the existing land use map. This is the outline of the subject property, and it's currently vacant. The yellow is indicating single-family uses in that area. And then the brown indicates duplex housing. So as I mentioned, to the east of the property, this is a development full of duplexes. And then there are a few to the south and to the east. This is a site photo of the view looking from Spokane Street east beyond the subject property toward the duplex houses that currently exist. So this is just east of the subject property. And this is a view of the subject property looking southeast toward the single-family development and duplex housing. This is the existing and surrounding zoning map. Subject property is located here. And as you can see, this area is C17. It's commercial zoning. And then we've got some areas that transition to an R17, then an R12. And here's another example of C17 zoning, and then the R12 zone. But north and south of it in this area, it's all zoned R12. So I'll provide a little additional background information just to indicate what could be developed on that subject property. Property again is 1 acre, which is 43,500 square feet. And if the developer wanted to, they could build up to 12 units and divide it up to 12 lots with an internal road. And on page 13, your staff report breaks it down, 11 and 12, but I'll go through it on my slide. So as it is right now, you could have 2 single-family dwelling units on that lot because it's 5,500 square feet per dwelling unit, and we would allow 2. Another option would be 3,500 square feet per dwelling unit, or 7,000 square feet, which would allow for 1 duplex, 2 units. The potential of the subject property, if divided, could be divided up into 3 parcels and allow for our 50 feet of frontage requirement along Spokane Avenue. So based on that lot square footage of 43,560 square feet, you could divide it up and have 3 single-family dwelling units, or you could have 3 separate lots with 3 separate duplex units or 6 units. So as far as...
Could I ask a question while
Sure.
you're going? So go back to that one where it's duplex or single family. So 3 family dwellings on that same piece of dirt or 3 duplexes.
Correct. So are you talking about this area that I
I
mentioned?
was looking
or-
at the last one there,
Yeah.
the subdivision with
And
the
this is if
frontage.
it was split into 3 separate lots.
And you'd still have to put a road in it, like it.
On this one, no. 50 feet of frontage would be required along Spokane Street or Spokane Avenue, and then they would have to put their driveway in to access the 3 or individual duplex buildings, each lot.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier, 12 lots would need a road,
Correct.
single family.
Similar to the neighboring property to the east where they put Kaylee Court in there.
Right, it's like
And then you have that street frontage to access each lot.
The
And he could do the
cul-de-sac.
same. He could actually punch a road in there and then put 12 homes in there.
Okay, thank you.
So as far as the R17 zoning district, the R17 zoning district is described and intended as a medium and high residential area that permits a mix of housing types at 17 units per gross acre. The district is for establishment in those areas that are not suitable for lower density residential due to the proximity to more intense types of land use. And this district is appropriate as a transition between low-density residential and commercial districts, or as a buffer between arterial streets and low-density residential areas. So that's what our code, that's how our code describes the R17 zone. And by right, principal uses in the R17 zoning district are listed here on the slide: single-family, duplex housing, childcare, community education, home occupation, essential service, civic administrative, and multifamily housing, neighborhood recreation, and public recreation. So the difference between the R12 zoning district and R17 is R12 does not allow multifamily, the R17 zoning district does. And in addition, the R17 zoning district by special use permit would allow for an R34 density increase special use permit. They would have to go through the planning commission for that.
Woody, could you explain the difference between multifamily and duplex? Am I missing, duplex is two?
Correct.
Multifamily?
Side-by-side construction,
Okay, multifamily
Common
is like an
law.
apartment building?
correct.
Okay, and no restrictions on how big or how many?
It's based on the density, it's 2,500 square feet per unit. Also, the difference that you want to consider is single-family dwelling units and duplex housing in the R12 zoning district are only allowed to be 32 feet tall. A multifamily building could be 43 feet tall. And in the R17, if an R34 special use permit was approved, it could be 63 feet tall.
Thank you.
Tammy,
Yes.
before you get too far ahead, can you back up to the zoning code? When
Sure.
you talked about, can you just go over that one more time for me?
Sure. So the R17 zoning district, when it talks about the district and it's intended as a medium-high residential area, permits a mixed type of housing, 17 units per gross acre. That district is for establishments in those areas that are not suitable for lower density residential due to the proximity to more intense types of land use. And we underline this. This district is appropriate as a transition between low-density residential and commercial districts, or as a buffer between arterial streets and low-density residential districts.
Okay.
That's referring to the zoning, not this property.
Correct. The R12 zoning district, I can read that to you as well. This district is intended as a residential area that permits a mix of housing types at a density of not greater than 12 units per acre. The district is intended for those areas in the city that are developed at this density or are preferably developed at this density because of factors such as vehicular access, topography, flood hazard, and landslide hazard.
Tammy, just one other question. In the R12 zoning district, the largest building you can have is a fourplex. Is that correct?
Actually, only a duplex.
So the largest building is a duplex in R12.
Correct. And the maximum height for a duplex would be 32 feet, and that's the same that we allow for single family,
So when you transition from R12 to R17, that allows you to build.
43 feet,
And to build
multiple
multiple
units.
units. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Tammy, the R12, does it have any of the ability to apply for additional special use like the R17 did up to an, R17 you said could apply to go to an R34?
Yeah, the only thing you
R12
could
is
do
not.
by special use permit is request a 2-unit per gross acre density increase. Since he has 1 acre, he would be able to get an additional 2 units if it were approved. That would allow for 14 units on that site.
So, in one of the pictures, it talked about duplexes that are adjacent. So those existing duplexes they're less than 32 feet or whatever?
Correct. They're either 32 feet or less than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you. So Tammy, one thing that you haven't touched upon yet is the place where NIC keeps its guns, which is just north of this property. That's, if I understand, that's a legal non-conforming use, which means it's in an R12 because that was the zone that was applied to it, but the building itself and the purpose is civic.
That's correct. It's used for storage. I spoke with Bill Greenwood prior to the Planning Commission meeting, and they don't expect to use that for any, sports activities. It's going to be used for storage and so on. Should that building go away, it would revert back to the allowed uses in the R12 zoning district.
So in our big picture in the comp plan, we don't consider that building when we refer to stable established, because that building would go away if the use changed.
I would say so. We also, have the understanding that some of these uses have been here for a long time. Bill mentioned that building, the Armory building, which is located here, was built in the 50s. So it's been there for a very long time.
What's the process that the landowner would go through if the R17 rezone is approved and he wanted to go to R34?
He would complete an application, submit it to staff, and go before the Planning Commission requesting a special use permit.
And would that come to us?
It would not. It only would require the Planning Commission's approval unless it was appealed.
Okay. The traffic, so we're talking about, in the staff report, it talks about Spokane Street, but it doesn't really talk about 7th Street, and 7th Street is kind of the busy street there. I did ask a question of the police chief regarding any traffic accidents that take place at the intersection of 7th and Harrison, and I was hoping that Chief White could share that information with council.
Okay.
If that's appropriate at this time.
Do we want to, Tammy, you're making the presentation, so I don't want to, I want you to be able to complete your presentation, then maybe we can have Lee White come after.
I'd like to get my last slide done, if
Yeah,
that's okay.
well, let's let her do that.
Thank you. All right, so the last slide, the action alternatives. The City Council is being asked to consider this request with respect to compatibility of the requested R17 zoning, and if the zone change would be consistent with the surrounding land uses and the comprehensive plan. The City Council must consider the request and make the appropriate findings to approve, deny without prejudice. So you can utilize your comprehensive plan and the discussion we had about the land uses surrounding the subject property.
So let's have questions for Tammy, and
Okay.
then we can bring Chief White up. So questions.
So,
What,
great presentation, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Thanks for all the little weird things that you guys do. I mean, I don't mean it negatively, it's just there's so many rules
you,
to
Eddie.
everything.
Can you use
The
the
words
word
right there, the compatibility request from R17 zoning, there is no R17 around that. Is that correct? Can you show me
That's
that map
correct. We
again?
can take a look at the zoning map again.
Thanks. So when you say on that slide, it says that we are going to decide if it's compatible, if R17 is compatible with R12. Okay, I guess I got lost in the compatibility thing, thinking that it's like a buffer. We're going from this to that. And you're saying that R17 works with R12.
It transitions. So one thing you could consider when you're trying to make your decision is does the rezone single out a piece of property for a use that is inconsistent with the surrounding uses? So I covered a lot of information in my presentation dealing with the land use map and what's to the north of it, the Armory building, that legally non-conforming use, and to the east of it, the existing duplexes and that subdivision that just has duplexes. But then the west side has, single family and a few duplexes to the south. So those are the things you're going to want to consider when you make your decision about the land uses surrounding that property and the comprehensive plan. And I've included a lot of policies in the staff report that you may want to look at when you make your decision.
Dan, English.
Would you define, because they don't come up every day, the difference between deny and deny without prejudice? What?
I think, Mike, really, can you define a little clearer about denying and denying without prejudice? They have 1 year to reapply if it's denied without prejudice?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Otherwise, they can come back and change
Guy's
it.
so long-winded, I
He's
swear.
saving his words for something.
So other questions for Tammy? Amy?
So in the staff report here, it says that the zoning code states that the R17 zoning district is appropriate as a transition between low-density residential and commercial districts, or as a buffer. But in this specific case, it's not acting as a buffer. Is that how I'm reading that? Because it's not along an arterial or adjacent to a commercial district.
That would be up to you all to make that determination.
Okay.
Mayor Whitmire, I had Hillary come up and explain to me that it's the opposite of what I said. So I want to make sure we have full clarity here. If it's denied without prejudice, they can come back. If it's denied with prejudice, they have to wait a year to come back.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Other questions for Tammy? Kiki?
Tammy, the Armory property that is around this property has that tail that comes down. Is that part of the Armory, or is that owned by a different?
That is correct. It's part of the Armory.
So that surrounds part of the east side of this. Okay.
Find it on my slide for you. I believe you're referring to this area.
Right. No, just north of that residential house right there.
I
That-
believe the
yeah.
NIC owns all of this.
Okay.
Tammy, if we could go back to the map that showed the subject property in red, the proposed in red.
Let's see. This one or a different
One
one?
more, we'll find it here someday. It was the one that showed all of the uses around,
So this is the
surrounding
existing
there.
land use map. And then the next one is our zoning map.
The light blue to the north of there, that's a PUD.
That's a planned unit development. It's been there a long, long time. I couldn't get a lot of information about it, but I believe it was due to some wastewater limitations years and years ago. Some of the PUDs were put in place because of that, some limitations. But it's been there for a long time.
Other questions for Tammy? Thank you
You're
very much.
welcome.
And Lee, if you could, wouldn't mind coming up and addressing Dan's question on traffic at 7th and Harrison.
Good evening again. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your earlier question.
I just wanted you, if you could share with council the information that you sent me regarding the number of injury accidents that take place at the intersection of 7th and Harrison and 7th and Harrison.
Sure. I didn't break them down to injury or non-injury, but I do have data on total number of traffic crashes we've had in that area. In 2015, there were 2 crashes at or near the intersection of 7th and Harrison. In 2016, we had 6. And 2017, so far this year, we've had 2.
Since we're deciding about this, I thought that I would have the chief, because he sent it to me today, because I asked a question that someone else had asked me, and it does relate to this, because it's just 1 block south, and it's not mentioned in the staff report. So thank you, chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We will now allow the applicant, we'll have 10 minutes to make a presentation. The applicant here tonight can come on up and make his presentation. And we'll have Renata swear you in.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And state your name for the record, please.
Brenny Ross.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Tammy, for your presentation, and thank you, council, for allowing me to speak. A little history for me on the property and just the reason that I'm here today applying for the zone change is when I originally purchased the property many years ago, my goal was to build 12 cottages on the property under the pocket housing development ordinance. And with the recent rescinding of that ordinance, it brings me down to, as Tammy stated, the ability to basically put a single-family home or a duplex on the property without going to a subdivision, a major subdivision. My goal was to always obtain ownership of the whole lot with the cottages on it. And my goal was always to build them all ground level, product on that lot. Now that the pocket housing ordinance is gone, with nothing to really replace it yet, my main ability to continue to build any sort of a multifamily product on that property and make the property feasible for me to develop pointed towards the R17 zone. So that's my major reason for coming in for it. As far as transition, R17 zone is traditionally designed to transition from a heavier impact between a commercial site and residential. And I would argue that this is doing that with the presence of the Armory building, which, in addition to whatever storage or civic use that they are doing inside the building, there's heavy storage outside with containers, with semi-trucks. When Iron Man comes into town, all the semi-trucks pull in there. It's a major reason why I put the fence up. I'm not complaining what they're doing there. I would argue that this is a suitable transition between the residential and the single-family housing there. I think with that, I would stand for any questions that you may have.
Questions? Woody?
Brenny, it's kind of messed up that we dumped the pocket housing and didn't give something back to make it work. I know they're working on it, so how long you want to sit on this? Let me ask you this. You were talking about 12 cottages, and as I understood, theoretically, you could put 12 lots in there, put the street, the cul-de-sac.
Correct. And that's through a major subdivision, which isn't a sure thing. It's expensive, and it also creates additional public roads instead of a private community that I'm trying to do there. It also increases property taxes because for a investment hold type property, it creates individual lots with individual sewer connections and also individual water meters. So the expense is far greater for the end goal that I would like to accomplish.
So you're looking to make it more dense, but you don't want to do a subdivision. I don't. And it sounds like it's economics, and you're telling me that you can make it more dense with multifamily and spend less money than you would doing 12 subdivision.
My main reason isn't to increase the density. My main reason is to get back to the original plan of getting 12 units on the property under one lot, common ownership, and not me doing a major subdivision into 12 separate lots.
Okay. Thanks.
Dan?
Mr. Mayor, Brenny, you mentioned that the cost of the individual sewer water connections, how would you have avoided that cost?
Under the pocket housing ordinance, I would still have to pay the cap fees on connection for each of those units, but I would not have to construct a public road with a public sewer system and a public water system coming through the property.
And how would you avoid that on an R17?
Under the rules, I'm allowed to do multifamily or duplex housing on the property where it used to be allowed under the pocket housing, but now that that's gone, I'm down to a single-family home. Basically, those stats that Tammy laid out for you.
A single-family home was all you would build there?
Is all I would be allowed to build there right now, or I think it was a duplex or two.
Okay, so you only be allowed to do one single-family home? That's what you're saying?
And Tammy can clarify, but it's right there in the report, kind of what would be allowed to be done
Okay.
currently.
When the city rescinded the pocket housing rule, did they contact you about it?
I knew it was coming down the pipeline. I actually had a plan submitted prior to the rescinding, but it was chosen not to be vested.
Was chosen, what does that mean?
Well, well, they consider it not in time. Basically, I had a project review scheduled the day, basically the day before that night, they rescinded the pocket housing development, but it was chosen not to be accepted.
So you were on the schedule and then we repealed it?
Actually, building department refused to even schedule it because the meeting was coming down that night.
Okay, thank you.
Kiki, did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to clarify. I thought that what Tammy had said is that currently in duplexes, you could put actually 12 units or 6 structures, and you could ask for a variance for one more. Is that where you're at right now with the current zoning? If
Not
you-
without some subdividing into additional lots.
So you'd still have to go through, but you wouldn't have to put so that's what you're capped at is 3 duplexes.
Yeah, Tammy had laid out a couple different
Right.
scenarios there, a 3-lot subdivision with Spokane Street being the frontage, which would get me, I believe, the 6 units she was talking about. I don't have it in front of me, and then the option for the 12 lots would include a major subdivision and public utilities, public road.
But with 6 units, I'm sorry, with 6 units, is that 6 duplex structures? So it's 12 different residences?
Not what I believe the scenario that she laid out was. I believe it was 3 duplexes and 6 units. Yes.
3 duplexes, with the ability to request one more, so the maximum number of residences he could put in there would be 8.
Not under
different-
that scenario that she was talking about, the 3-lot, 3 duplexes totaling 6 units.
I guess, Kiki, you're asking that through that special
Right.
use permit process, could he have 8?
8, right. If there were 4 structures, you'd have 8 separate residences without having to subdivide that one lot.
I'd have to refer that question to planning.
As I understand it, you'd need a special, with an R12, you need a special use permit.
Right.
Increased density, 1 acre, so he gets 2 extra units. So he could go to 14 if he puts in a street.
But without
Tammy
putting-
will confirm whether,
Yeah,
you know,
but
what's all
without
what.
putting in a street, he could go to 8.
Yeah.
Kiki, did you get your question answered?
I think so.
Okay.
I think you were shooting for 12 pocket houses, and in my mind, I was trying to say, what's the number of residences you could do if they were attached to each other instead of separate houses?
Yeah,
Could you
that
do
falls
8
under-
residences and not have to go through?
I believe the answer to that question is currently without any subdividing. And I have to look at that scenario there. I believe it was 1 or 2 duplexes.
Any other questions for
I want to ask Brittany one more time, because I want to make sure I understand this. I know we can be intimidating, especially Dan English down there. Don't get me started. So what you said, if I understand, is you'd only be allowed to build 1 family home, or you mean single-family home?
1 single-family home.
Just 1 on the whole lot?
Correct, the way it sits, or the scenarios we've been talking about with duplexing.
1 without, if he wanted more, he would have to go through the subdivision process.
Wait, even though she said in her staff report that given 50 feet of frontage, you could build 3 homes on the lot.
And she might need to clarify, you get 50 foot of frontage per single-family dwelling, and if you divide that, I believe if I divided that, I think I have 160 feet along there into 3 lots, I could then do 3 single-family homes or 3 duplexes. Currently, as 1 lot, it's a single-family home or it kicks into duplex, and I need her to clarify how many of those I could do if I had that
Dan, we'll have.
staff report. I
We'll have
could-
Tammy clarify
If
that.
there's any
Thank
more
you.
questions, any other questions for Brenny? Okay, that'll be.
All right, thank you.
Tammy, if you could come up for a minute so we can get some clarification on a few of these questions. So I guess one of our questions is, as is right now, how many duplexes could he build on that acre?
Okay, as is, this large lot, 1 acre, you could have 2 single-family dwelling units on that parcel, or you could have 1 duplex, which encompasses 2 units. He could have a 3-lot subdivision, go through the preliminary plat process, split this into 3 lots, because that would meet the 50 feet of frontage requirement for a lot, a buildable lot. That would allow you to have 3 separate single-family dwelling units. Actually, you could put 2 on the lot, because it's, I know this gets really confusing, 5,500 square feet per dwelling unit. So let's take this and slice it up into 3 pieces, so 3 individual lots, meeting the 50 feet of frontage requirement, because it's 161 feet wide. And then it would allow, the other option is one duplex, another duplex, and another duplex. The third option would be to subdivide this, go through a long subdivision, punch a road in, and you could have 12 units. So we quickly looked at the code. I mentioned the 2-unit per acre density increase. That was utilized for pocket housing. I think staff's going to have to look at that a little more and see how it would pertain to this, whether it would actually be an option through the special use permit now. But those are the development options on this lot. So you can do a few other things other than just one single-family dwelling unit as it sits now as one parcel.
So if you look at the development to the east of there, that's a city street that was punched through their Kayla Court.
Correct.
So they punched the city street through there, plotted each one of those lots and built duplexes on them?
Yeah, they created a subdivision.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked on the county's website. A couple of them are condominium plats, separate owners. I think there's 2 of them within that subdivision, so.
Okay.
So Tammy, he's correct in that right now, if he doesn't subdivide it, one house,
He could actually put 2 single-family dwelling units on that lot.
without having to subdivide it.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tammy?
As long as he meets the performance standards, the setbacks and so on.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a time in this process for what's called the primary opponent. I don't know if there's a primary opponent here, but if anyone wishes to come and speak for an extended period of time, the primary opponent is allowed to have 10 minutes. If I do have at least one person that wants to testify down the road here, but so this is the time for anyone that would be considered to be a primary opponent to have 10 minutes of testimony. Is there anyone that would consider themselves to be that? If you'd like to speak for 10 minutes, we'll listen to 10 minutes.
I don't know if we want that.
Yeah.
You look ready. Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is your name for the record, please?
My name is Dave Chamberlain. I live on the corner of 7th and Harrison, the one we've been talking about. By the way, there was more than 3 accidents or 2 accidents this year. Yesterday, or day before yesterday, we had a motorcycle hit in that very dangerous intersection. And his plan right now, if it's 1 or 2 condos, that's fine. I live in a condo too. That's what that's set for. It's R12. It's residential 12. You're asking and allowing to take somebody and build on a property with nothing said really what's going to happen. It's all, well, he could, well, he could, well, he could. We know how that goes. You go to 17, up he goes, 42 feet, 2 stories. Make the most money out of every square inch. I mean, that's what you do in investment. It is not a buffered area. It's not even close. It's 2.5 blocks, 2 blocks away from 4th Street. So there's already some multi-housing there. I understand that. But if you look at that red map, it's out, the little thing you were talking about earlier, Steve, it's isolated. It's out of the way. And I don't see a reason, after what Renata said tonight, I even agree more, it needs to stay R12. Stay with the settings. That is not a buffered area. R17 should not be allowed in that, because otherwise you open that up, who's to say I can't turn to my property to R17 and build something, and the guy next to me? You're starting to increase, and you're allowing it. By doing that middle of the road there, you're actually allowing people like me then to come in and say, well, you gave it to him, why won't you give it to me, to the Planning Commission, of course. So I'm just asking you guys to kind of take a look, like you were talking earlier about rules getting broken and changed. The problem is R17 allows for a lot. R12 is what is entirely around it, and it should stay that way, in my opinion. Thanks, guys. Anything?
Thank you. So now we'll go on to just general testimony, and I have only one other person on here, Sean St. Marie, that said he is in opposition and wishes to testify. Come on up.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and
So
council
Renata will
members.
swear you in, please.
Oh, there, I need to swear you in. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And name for the record, please.
Sean St. Marie.
Great.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I live on the 1300 block of 7th Street, so it is this house right here, right there. I recently purchased this house. I've lived here a little while. I purchased it under the assumption that it would remain R12, and this is kind of upsetting to me because I feel like it could negatively impact my property value. Also, as has been mentioned, the buffer zones I feel aren't sufficient for this property. It's R12 all the way around it. There isn't the light commercial buffer that you see in other areas. As others have mentioned, increased traffic. There are some uncontrolled intersections around that area. So the increased traffic would have an effect. And basically, I'm fine with him building a couple duplexes. There are duplexes already in that neighborhood. I myself own a couple duplexes in the Coeur d'Alene area. I don't have opposition to that. I just am worried about it going to R34, once it goes to R17, because that's kind of, seems like it could be a slippery slope. This neighborhood, it has a lot of character. It's in Midtown. The house I live in was built in 1940. So I'd like to maintain, the original character of this neighborhood and make sure that, a huge apartment building isn't built on this lot. So I think those are my only comments at this time. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
I have a question for Sean.
Yeah.
Sean, your position of your house puts it kind of close to where the entrance is for the Armory building. What kind of traffic do you see there?
Yeah, that was another point I was going to bring up. I haven't noticed any large trucks or anything like that. It's really quiet over in this area in front of the Armory. I have a pretty good view from my house, and I haven't noticed any traffic at all, really. It seems like there's hardly ever anything that goes on there.
Okay,
Just
thank you.
storage.
Thank you. So I had other people signed up, Althea and Alan Scarillo, but they were in opposition but didn't wish to testify. And then I had Georgia Johnson, opposition but did not wish to testify. Is there anyone that I may have missed that wished to testify on this matter? Okay, we will then have, Brenny, if you would like to have a couple of minutes to sum up the project and your request, you would have a couple of minutes to do so.
Thank you. I'll just take a moment to comment on the concerns that were just expressed. If there's any way possible going forward with this R17, my goal is not to build a massive apartment building coming up out of the ground. My goal is still to try to do ground floor. I don't fully understand everything, building requirements in the R17 zone, but my goal would still be to either do ground floor duplexes at all possible. So my goal is not to build a massive apartment building. My goal is always to have ground floor units for older people to live in. Wanted to address just the transition and the conforming one more time. While it is R12 zone surrounding the property, the legal non-conforming uses on two of my sides, in my opinion, create a suitable transition with the R17 zone. As far as traffic, I do have pictures of the semi-trucks with Iron Man on them coming in and out of the Armory building. And actually, as we were constructing the fence last year, code enforcement would actually come by several times asking if we were causing dust coming in and out of the Armory building, which we weren't, because there's so much traffic coming in and out of there. People further up 7th would actually call code enforcement to find out what was going on there. And that's at that time, I think they were having sports, a lot of young people coming in and out, whatever was happening in that building. That may have changed now. And again, through all this, I'm not complaining about what they're doing. That's why I put a fence up. I just want to argue the point of transition in that. and I don't know what the good answer is. I mean, I'd love to do pocket housing and some cottages in there, but with that, I would stand for any questions.
So Brandy, your original plan was pocket housing.
Yes,
If you could go back to that plan, would you?
I would, yeah.
So if there, and it's my understanding, and maybe we'll have Tammy speak on it a little bit, that there's going to be a plan that's, when we canceled pocket housing, I think the plan was that we were going to come back with a new plan that's going to allow that, but we needed to make a few rule changes.
Yeah, and time is of a fact. I mean, I need to continue with the project and on some aspect. And so this was kind of the best next step I could do, applying for the R17 zone. And then I would go back to planning with that zoning. How could I most mirror what I wanted to do originally now that I can do multiple units again?
Right, okay. Any other questions for Brandy?
Bernie, how long have you been on that property?
I think I've had it at least 4 years.
4 years? And that was, the plan was
When I purchased
pocket
it.
housing, cottages.
Yep.
I think
all
it's a
of that.
great plan. I wish we could, wish we had that.
Yeah, we're going to do a nice big timber head gate and, just a neat little community in there. I've done it before within the city, and they've been responded to very well, so wanted to do it again.
Other questions for Brandy? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess at this time, if there's no one that else would have testimony, I would close the public testimony portion of it. Tammy, could you come up for just a minute? And just one, I had one more question, and it was on this pocket housing. And Hillary is here too, and so we had some challenges with pocket housing. We knew we needed to make some changes because there were some things that weren't working the way we wanted it to work. How do we see that going forward to have some type of zoning or to allow pocket housing?
So recently, the city council approved the planning department's work plan, and you saw the list of items on our to-do list. That is one of the items. As we get time, and we are hoping fall or winter, we'll be able to take a closer look at that and provide for some infill housing as a component of the zoning update. So at this point in time, we don't have anything to provide. It's just going to take a little time to put something together.
Would this be a spot that would qualify for, I guess you'd be speculating now, right? But
I think we're looking at infill types of housing for it, so possibly.
okay, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tammy, when the department decided that you wanted to do away with a pocket housing ordinance, you approached us, you knew it was coming to us for a decision. What efforts were made to contact people who had plans in the bin at the time to tell them, did you tell them, forget it? Did you tell them, hurry up? How did that work?
We typically worked with most of the developers and let them know the timeline. We didn't have an exact time because it was going to go to planning commission. We had workshops and so on. But most of the developers were aware of the timeline, and we encouraged them to get the information in so they could, if they plan to move forward, get it in before it was repealed.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Tammy? Dan?
Well, no, not for.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Any other questions here? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Dan?
Oh, Tess, is everything closed?
We're closed, yeah. Shop is closed, just except for you.
Closed, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Would like to move to deny zone change ZC 2-17, the proposed zone change from R12 to R17 at 721 East Spokane Avenue. And for the findings, I believe that it is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies, which state this is stable established. It's very clearly R12 throughout. Also, for finding B9, I believe that the impact on traffic, especially on 7th Street, would be negative.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Woody?
Dan, I was wondering if it might be, I would probably ask them if it's, if it would help if we denied without prejudice to give him some workaround, to come back around, thinking that possibly some kind of a pocket housing thing could be done within a year. Is that the rule, a year? Gives, again, trying to stay with the spirit of what he wanted to do, and then we yank the rule, and, well, it's coming again. If we deny it without prejudice, he doesn't have to go back through this again. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, 'cause this is where I need an adult. What's the rule now?
If it's denied, he has to wait a year to come back. And if it's denied without prejudice, then he can come back with another proposal.
Another, it doesn't have to be the same proposal. He can come back with a different proposal on that property.
That's my understanding, but to double check me on that.
I just remember the denying without prejudice is the gentle touch, to give yourself a chance to recoup, rethink, rework.
Since he's only asking for the zone change, or he is asking for a zone change, the only other option to come back in a year would be for the zone change again for the R17 zoning district. If we came up with a better infill project similar to pocket housing, he may be able to look at the R12 zoning district that he currently has and be able to come up with a plan without going through the zone change. So I'm not sure what he would come back with after a year, other than another R17 request for zone change.
But if you were able to come up with the ordinance in a shorter period of time than a year, he wouldn't have to wait a full year to come back and have that apply if we deny without prejudice.
But he wouldn't need to come back for the zone change if we had something that took the place of pocket housing.
So what you're saying is that to deny without prejudice would allow him to come back with the R17 and submit that again. But if it stays R12 and there's some type of pocket housing ordinance, he can come back in less than a year through that route.
And he wouldn't necessarily, depending on the outcome of our infill housing, he wouldn't necessarily need to come back through Planning Commission or City Council for it, because pocket housing was a development allowed by right or used by right.
So he just goes through the building permit process.
Correct.
So no advantage or disadvantage to being denied without prejudice or just denied.
That's correct. So we did see, I want to make sure I'm clear, we did see pocket housing come through the Planning Commission if they wanted to subdivide it. So that was the case where it would have to go through the preliminary plat because they would have single ownership. But it wouldn't necessarily have to go through because of a zoning issue. It would be allowed by right.
Okay, I withdraw my thought.
It was a good thought.
You know where I was going.
Dan?
Just to explain my vote, that I'm going to support the other Dan's motion on this because I think it does not fit with the neighborhood characteristics and some of the same things. At the same time, I truly want us to keep on track with that because, again, in my day job, I see all the time that, we have a tremendous need for affordable housing in Coeur d'Alene, and hearing some of the characteristics that he's talking about, single level and, aging in place kind of thing. So, I support the neighborhood on this specific thing, but also we need to keep the ball moving on the pocket housing and/or other options for affordable housing.
Yes, and that is on our to-do list.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
So any further discussion on the motion in the second? So if there's no further discussion, roll call, please.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
Evans,
Yes.
English,
Yes?
Eddinger,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes?
Motion carried. We will move on to legislative hearing B-17-5. It's a request to vacate a portion of Annie Avenue right-of-way adjoining the easterly boundary of Lot 11 and 12 of the Bora 3rd Edition to the City of Coeur d'Alene plat. And we have a staff report by Dennis Grant. Take it away, Dennis.
Sorry. There's a spider on my leg.
There's no spiders
Chief,
allowed in the
spider.
library.
All right, thanks Renata for putting me last on the agenda. Appreciate it. All right. The applicant, Carol Ann Curtis, is requesting the vacation of a part of Annie Avenue right-of-way that adjoins the easterly boundary of her property on the northeast corner of 8th Street and Annie Avenue. So there's the exhibit up there, kind of shows you, you can see 8th Street and Annie,
And then the proposed right-of-way vacation is,
Use the computer screen in the
Oh.
mouse. Thank you very much.
yeah, I guess we're on TV here.
I'm sorry.
Right here,
I
this
can't see
black
what you're pointing
area
at.
is the proposed vacation. So I just wanted to make it clear.
Which one's her property, since you're pointing at the screen?
2002 8th Street, right here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. The requested right-of-way was originally dedicated to the city of Coeur d'Alene in the Bora 3rd edition in 1954. The vacation of the requested right-of-way would not have any financial impact on the city and would add approximately 596 square feet to the county tax roll. Although a minor amount, it would be a benefit to the municipality as tax revenue and to the landowner whose lot adjoins the strip of property. The purpose of this request is to vacate the unused street right-of-way. Annie Avenue is a dead-end street that was cut off when Interstate 90 was built. It is unimproved and not needed. All utilities are existing and in place, and there is no foreseeable use for this additional right-of-way. Therefore, the vacation of this portion of street right-of-way adjoining this lot would not impact the city and would be a benefit to the property owner. Staff recommends to the City Council to approve the vacation action per Idaho Code Section 50-1306 and to vacate the property to the applicant Carol Ann Curtis.
Okay, questions for Dennis? Dan?
It looks like there's a structure on this from the picture.
I did go out there and look, and there is a shed that's kind of fallen apart there, yes.
Okay, and with a vacation like this, do different parts of it go to adjacent property owners, or would it all go to just this one?
Per state code, it goes half to each property owner. In this case, the half is 2002 8th Street, and the other portion would be Interstate 90. So, and they don't want, so there's a discretion by the city engineer or us to make that call. So you're correct, it is half and half, but in this case, we can give that whole piece to one owner.
Okay.
Great question.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is really city property, or it's right-of-way? Because a right-of-way could be something that's on someone else's property.
No, city is city right away. So
city
it's
right-of-way.
owned by the public,
So it is public property?
yes.
Okay. And so we're just, it's like saying, we're not going to use it for anything.
That's
You
right.
already have a beat-up shed on it, so here.
Yeah, whatever you want to say.
And because we did not pay for it, we don't charge.
We cannot sell it, that's correct. It was platted back in 1954, and I believe Interstate 90 went in 1957, thereabouts. somewhere
Good
there.
timing.
Yeah.
Dennis, why would that piece have ever been city right-of-way? It just seems like it's just an odd piece.
Before the interstate went through, there was actually platted lots there. And so if Interstate 90 was not there, there could be houses there today.
Okay. Any other questions for Dennis? Woody?
Dennis, it seems like we've been over this area before. Did we get rid of some right-of-way and alleyways and stuff down and through there, or right-of-ways for sewer or water back in
Not that
there?
I recall, maybe with Chris Bates in the past.
I think, Woody, you're talking about, there was a water department owned like a little patch of land.
Okay,
Oh, I do recall that. I was
remembers
on 9th Street, I believe.
Yeah.
further down.
That
Okay.
was actual city property that we could sell, I believe. I don't know if that was,
And we did, we auctioned it off.
yeah, okay. Did I get it? I can't remember.
You bingo.
Okay.
It's nice to have the old guys around you.
Yeah, it is.
Good job.
Any other questions?
Well, I was ready to go for
Oh,
motion.
we're not quite there yet. Renata would not allow us to do that. We've got a little bit more work to do here. So, thank you, Dennis, for that report. And now is the time if anyone wishes to give public comment. I do have some people that are signed up on the list. They haven't indicated that they would like to comment. Carolyn Curtis is in favor. Debbie Stafford is in favor. Roger and Jackie Foster are in favor. Not sure if anyone wishes to testify, but I wanted to read that into the record that they were all in favor of that vacation. Anyone wish to come and give public testimony at this time? Okay, doesn't look like
On
it.
that note, could I add something, Mayor?
You can.
Okay. Neglected to mention the tally. We sent out 33 mailings and 2 responses were received, and both were 4.
Okay.
And I believe both of them are here today, so.
All right. All right, if I don't have anyone wishing to give public comment, I will close the public comment portion of that and look for council action.
I would make a motion to dispense with the rule and read Council Bill number 171029 once by title only.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Renata, if you would read the title, please.
Council Bill 17-1029, an ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, vacating a part of Annie Avenue right-of-way according to the plat of Bora, 3rd edition, recorded in Book D of Plats at page 52 in the office of the Recorder of Kootenai County, Idaho, generally described as that part of Annie Avenue right-of-way north of the center line of Annie Avenue and east of 8th Street, being situated in the northeast quarter of Section 12, Township 50 North, Range 4 West, Boise Meridian. City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing severability clause, and providing for the publication of a summary of this ordinance and an effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yep.
Motion carried. We looking for some more action?
I move to adopt Council Bill 17-1029.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Does anyone ever wonder like who Annie was? There had to be an Annie's at some point in time.
Annie, her last name was Avenue.
Nobody, but nobody knows that. It's getting kind of late, isn't it?
Oh, boy, yeah.
If there's no further discussion, roll call, please.
Gookin?
Yeah.
English?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Motion carried.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to make a motion, enter into executive session under Idaho Code Section 74206B, which is to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, individual agent, or public school student. That was not included in the original agenda. Also in the agenda, we have Idaho Code 74206F, which is to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of, legal options for, pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
But it has to be a roll call. That was to modify the agenda.
Okay, all right. You rule stickler, you. Roll call, please.
English?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Eddinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yes. Now we can.
Motion carried. Go to executive session.
Take a break.